They called her tainted, defective, unworthy to even serve wine at the Vampire King's coronation. But when Isolde Ravenshade fell asleep in his arms during the ceremony in front of 500 witnesses, Caspian Thornwood whispered 3 words that shattered a kingdom: "You are mine." In 48 hours, the broken Dhampir became the queen who would conquer sunlight itself. This is how she did it. The Grand Hall of Night Vale Castle held 500 vampires beneath vaulted ceilings that had witnessed 3 centuries of darkness. Tonight, the torches burned brighter than usual. Tonight, the Vampire King would finally choose his queen. Isolde Ravenshade stood behind a marble pillar arranging ceremonial chalices on a silver tray. Her fingers trembled. Everything in this castle felt too cold, too perfect, too pure for someone like her, someone tainted. The plain black servant's dress she wore had no embroidery, no jewels. Nothing to draw attention to the Dhampir who didn't belong among true vampires. Her dark hair was pulled back severely. 3 nights without sleep had etched exhaustion into every line of her face. She'd spent those nights tending sick vampires in the dungeon levels where no one else would go. The obsidian moon pendant at her throat caught torchlight. Her mother's pendant. Isolde's fingers found it once worn smooth from 15 years of worry. "Stop hiding and help with the blood wine." Her Aunt Ingrid's voice cut through the murmur of gathering nobles. Isolde stepped out from behind the pillar. Ingrid's expression was tight with worry. "I shouldn't be here," Isolde whispered, taking the crystal decanter. The wine inside gleamed like liquid rubies, like blood. The scent made her stomach turn. "Everyone knows I'm not eligible. You're 22. All unmated Dhampirs must attend. It's kingdom law." Ingrid's voice softened. "Just serve the wine, keep your head down, and leave before the bonding ritual." Kingdom law, the words that had governed Isolde's entire existence. In a society where pure blood determined worth, she was the anomaly, the Dhampir who couldn't drink human blood. "They only want me here to serve," Isolde said quietly, pouring wine into the first chalice with steady hands, despite her trembling heart. Ingrid's hand came down hard on her wrist. "Never call yourself defective," she hissed. "Your mother would have—" "My mother isn't here." Pain flashed across Ingrid's face. Minerva Ravenshade had died protecting the king's sister from a sunlight curse 15 years ago. Isolde's memory of her mother was fading but precious. Gentle hands braiding her hair, a voice saying that someday her difference would be her strength. "I'm sorry," Isolde said softly. Before Ingrid could respond, silence fell over the gathering. Every vampire turned toward the northern entrance. Vampire King Caspian Thornwood had arrived. Even from across the vast hall, his presence was overwhelming. He stood at the top of the grand staircase, a figure carved from shadow and power. Impossibly tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry a kingdom's weight. His hair fell past his shoulders in waves of midnight black. His face could have been sculpted by ancient gods. But his eyes, crimson as fresh blood, ancient as the stones beneath their feet. Eyes that had watched empires rise and fall. Eyes that held 300 years of death and devastating intelligence. At 35 in appearance, he had ruled Night Vale Kingdom for a decade. But he was so much older, so much more dangerous than any ruler before, and he had never chosen a queen. Isolde watched him descend the stairs with fluid grace. Every eye followed him. She should look away, should disappear into shadows. But something held her frozen. For just a moment, his gaze swept across the crowd. For just a heartbeat, those crimson eyes found hers. Isolde's breath caught. Time stopped. The pendant pulsed with sudden heat. Then the moment shattered. Caspian looked away, continuing toward his throne. "It's starting," Ingrid whispered, nudging her toward the back. "Stay here. Help when called. Then leave." Isolde nodded, grateful for clear boundaries. She shrank into shadows as Ingrid joined the council members. Elder Theron, the kingdom's spiritual leader, raised gnarled hands toward the blood-red moon, visible through stained glass windows. "On this sacred night, when the blood moon blesses us with its fullest light, we gather to honor our traditions. Tonight we present our finest daughters, that our king might find among them a worthy queen." One by one, 7 eligible purebloods stepped forward, each more stunning than the last. Isolde recognized most, Celestine, daughter of the High Chancellor, whose silver hair gleamed like starlight. Twins Daria and Helena, known for hypnotic voices and strategic minds. Victoria, whose family controlled the eastern blood farms. 2 others from neighboring kingdoms, political alliances that would expand territory. And then Morgana Blackwater. Isolde's chest tightened, tall and graceful raven hair cascading in perfect waves, eyes like molten amber, a face that could launch wars. She was everything a vampire queen should be. Pure-blooded, powerful, politically connected, daughter of General Thaddeus Blackwater, the king's most trusted commander. The unanimous favorite. They had been friends once in childhood, before Morgana realized befriending the damper would damage her standing. 3 years ago, Morgana had made her feelings clear. You're a burden to the kingdom, Isolde. They only keep you out of respect for your mother's sacrifice. The words had cut deep, perhaps because they echoed Isolde's own darkest thoughts. She was so lost in memory that she didn't notice Elder Theron gesturing until Ingrid appeared with a sharp nudge. The wine, Isolde. Now. Flushing, Isolde hurried to the obsidian altar where 7 crystal chalices waited. Her task was simple. Fill each with sacred blood wine, finest vintage, mixed with a single drop of each candidate's blood. Tradition said it would reveal their true nature to the king. Her hands trembled as she lifted the heavy decanter. She could feel eyes watching, hear whispers. The tainted one. Poor thing, Isolde gritted her teeth and focused. This at least she could do correctly. She filled each chalice without spilling a drop. As she reached the final chalice, Morgana approached, close enough that Isolde could smell expensive perfume. Try not to embarrass yourself tonight, Isolde, Morgana whispered, sweet poison. Or better yet, disappear after serving. Isolde kept her eyes downcast. I'm just doing what's required. Morgana laughed softly, as if you could ever do more. With a contemptuous glance, she took her chalice and glided away. Isolde set down the decanter, chest tight with familiar ache. Part of her wanted to flee, but the pendant pulsed warm. Like encouragement, like her mother's hand on her shoulder, she stayed. The next phase began. Each pure blood stepped forward to present herself to King Caspian. One by one they approached his massive throne of black stone and silver, offering chalices and speaking ritual words. Isolde watched, mesmerized despite herself. There was something hypnotic about the king's presence. Unlike previous rulers who led through fear, Caspian Thornwood ruled with quiet, devastating power. A single look from those crimson eyes could bring generals to their knees. Isolde had never spoken to him directly. Why would a king address the weakest member of his court? But she had observed from afar. Watched how he mediated disputes, pushed warriors to their limits, while listening to concerns of even the lowest ranked. Everyone except her. When Morgana's turn came, silence fell like a blade. She approached with perfect confidence, head high, radiating certainty. The crowd held its collective breath. This was it. After 10 years of refusal, Caspian Thornwood would finally choose. My king, Morgana said, voice clear and strong. I come before you under the blessed blue moon, offering myself as your potential queen. My strength would be your strength, my loyalty unwavering, my body ready to bear the next generation of Thornwood heirs. Caspian's expression remained unreadable as he accepted the chalice. Their fingers brushed briefly. He took a longer sip than with the others, dark eyes never leaving Morgana's face. When he handed the chalice back, the slightest smile touched his lips. The first reaction he'd shown all evening. Isolde's heart sank. It was decided. She could slip away unnoticed now. She began backing toward the edge of the hall, planning her escape. And then chaos erupted. The eastern windows exploded inward in a shower of stained glass and ancient stone. Screams pierced the air. The scent of blood, real blood, flooded the hall. Shadowfang Coven had come to Nightville. Dark shapes poured through shattered windows. Vampires in black armor, faces hidden behind silver masks. They moved with lethal speed, fangs bared, weapons gleaming. The broken moon over crossed blades. Shadowfang, ancient enemies who'd been poisoning their borders for decades. An attack during the Blood Moon selection when defenses were lowered was strategically brilliant. Warriors to me, Caspian's voice cut through panic like a sword, instantly commanding. Council members, evacuate nobility to lower sanctums. Everyone else, arm yourselves. The hall erupted into controlled chaos. Vampires scattered. Some shifted into battle forms. Others grabbed weapons. The 7 candidates froze before survival instincts kicked in. Isolde stood paralyzed, uncertain. She wasn't a warrior, wasn't nobility. In crisis, her uselessness became painfully apparent. Ingrid appeared, gripping her arm. Go to the old sanctuary and prepare healing supplies. We'll need treatment for wounded. Isolde nodded, grateful for purpose, and turned to run. But before she could take more than a few steps, the ceiling cracked. More Shadowfang warriors dropped from rafters. One landed directly in front of her. She could see her terrified face reflected in his silver mask. His blade was already rising, aimed for her heart. Isolde didn't think. Her body moved on instinct from years of avoiding cruelty. She dove sideways, rolling across stone. The blade whistled past her ear close enough to feel wind. The warrior advanced. Isolde scrambled backward. Her hand found something. A broken torch, wood and dying flame. She swung wildly. The warrior laughed. The sound was wrong, distorted behind his mask. Then his head separated from his shoulders in a spray of dark blood. He crumpled, revealing the figure behind him. Caspian Thornwood stood there, hand dripping with gore, crimson eyes blazing with inhuman fury. For a moment their gazes locked. Isolde saw something in those ancient eyes that looked almost like fear. Then he was gone, moving like liquid shadow toward the next cluster of enemies. Isolde didn't waste the chance. She ran. The corridors were case. Vampires fighting, screaming, dying. The scent of blood was overwhelming. She couldn't drink, it couldn't use it for strength like purebloods. She was slower, weaker, more vulnerable. She reached the old sanctuary after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The ancient chapel had been abandoned for decades but was stocked with basic medical supplies. Defensible with a narrow entrance. Isolde burst through heavy wooden doors and immediately began gathering supplies. Bandages, herbs, precious vials of healing elixir. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency despite her racing heart. Then the wounded started arriving. First one, then three, then a dozen. Warriors dragging themselves or each other through the doors. Blood everywhere. Isolde's stomach churned, but she forced herself to focus. This she could do. This she was good at. She triaged with quick efficiency, identified critical injuries, started treating the worst first. Her mother's training took over. Her mother's journal, memorized from countless late-night readings, guided her hands. Nightshade for poison wounds. Silver root to counteract silver blade cuts. Pressure points to slow bleeding. Herbal compounds to prevent infection. Time lost meaning. There was only the next patient, the next injury, the next life to save. She worked in focus of desperation, barely aware of battle sounds growing closer, then fading, then disappearing entirely. Dawn light filtered through high windows before she realized the fighting had stopped. Isolde looked around the chapel. 32 wounded vampires filled the pews and floor. 32 who would have died without treatment. Her dress was soaked with their blood. Her hands cramped from constant motion. Her vision swam with exhaustion. She swayed on her feet, caught herself on a pew, tried to focus on the next patient. The sanctuary doors opened. Isolde turned, expecting more wounded. Instead, she found herself facing Vampire King Caspian Thornwood. He was covered in blood. Dark arterial spray across his face and chest, his hands dripping with it. But he moved with the same fluid grace, seemingly uninjured beneath the gore. His crimson eyes swept the sanctuary, taking in the wounded, the organized treatment areas, the efficiency of her makeshift hospital. Then those eyes found hers. Isolde froze, her heart hammered against her ribs. She should bow, should kneel, should do something other than stand there staring. "You're Minerva's daughter," he said. His voice was different from the commanding shout in the hall. Quieter, almost gentle. "Yes, your majesty," she whispered. Her voice came out hoarse from hours of shouted instructions. He moved closer, each step deliberate, not threatening but purposeful. He stopped an arm's length away, studying her with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Your mother saved my sister Isadora 15 years ago, from a sunlight curse that should have killed her." His gaze moved to the pendant at her throat. Recognition flickered. She was brave, brilliant. She gave her life so mine could continue. Isolde's fingers found the obsidian moon. "Thank you for remembering her. I could never forget." Something shifted in his expression. "Just as I will never forget that her daughter saved 32 of my people tonight, while others fled or fought, you healed." Isolde looked down at her blood-soaked hands. "I only did what needed to be done." "Exactly." The word hung between them, weighted with meaning she couldn't grasp. She swayed again, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. Caspian's hand shot out, steadying her with gentle but firm grip on her elbow. His touch was cool, solid, real. "How long since you slept?" 3 days. I was tending the sick in the lower dungeons. Then the ceremony, then..." She gestured at the sanctuary. His jaw tightened. "You need rest." "I need to finish treating. My personal healers are on their way. They'll continue your work." His voice carried absolute authority. "You've done enough, Isolde Ravenshade." Hearing her name in his voice sent shivers down her spine. She wanted to argue, but her knees were already buckling. "The ceremony," she said weakly. "You need to complete the selection." Something flickered in his crimson eyes. "The ceremony was interrupted by war. Protocol demands we resume it at dawn to show strength." That shadow fang cannot break our traditions. Dawn, it was already dawn. I should go, she said. Let you in. You'll attend, Caspian said. Not a request. Kingdom law requires all unmated dampers to witness the selection. Isolde's stomach dropped. She couldn't face that hall again. Couldn't watch him choose Morgana. Couldn't endure whispers and stares while covered in blood and swaying from exhaustion. But kingdom law was absolute. Yes, your majesty, she whispered. His hand was still on her elbow, still steadying her. He studied her gaze for a long moment as if memorizing every detail. Then he released her and stepped back. 1 hour. The ceremony will resume in 1 hour. My attendants will help you prepare. Before Isolde could protest, he was gone. The next hour passed in a blur. Royal attendants appeared, guiding her to a preparation chamber. They tried to give her a new dress, something fine. But Isolde refused. She cleaned the worst blood from her skin and hair, but kept her simple black servant's dress, kept her mother's pendant. This was who she was. Not a candidate, not a noble, just Isolde. Just the Dampier who had survived another night. When she entered the grand hall, the contrast nearly stopped her heart. Shattered windows covered with tapestries, blood clean from marble floors, dead removed. It looked almost normal, except for the tension. The barely controlled fear in every vampire's eyes, hands hovering near weapons, nobles clustering together for protection. Isolde moved to the very back, trying to make herself invisible. Her body screamed for sleep. Her eyes burned. Her hands trembled. She just needed to witness this final ritual. See Caspian, choose Morgana, then collapse. The 7 candidates stood in their places, ceremonial dresses showing signs of chaos. A tear here, a bloodstain there. Even Morgana's perfect appearance was diminished. Dark circles under her eyes, hair not quite as immaculate. Elder Theron stepped forward, ancient voice ringing across silence. Last night, our sacred ceremony was interrupted by those who wished to see our kingdom weakened. But we stand here now, united in our determination to honor our traditions. The selection will continue. Our king will choose his queen. He turned to Caspian, who sat once again on his throne. Perfectly composed, utterly unreadable. Your Majesty, have you made your decision? Isolde held her breath along with everyone else. Caspian rose to his feet. His presence seemed to fill the entire hall. Those crimson eyes swept across the 7 candidates. I have, he said. His deep voice carried effortlessly. He began walking forward, past Celestine with her silver hair, past the twins with their hypnotic voices, past Victoria with her political connections, past the 2 foreign candidates with their territorial alliances. He stopped before Morgana. The hall held its collective breath. This was it. Caspian looked at Morgana for a long moment. Then without a word, he stepped past her. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Where was he going? There were no more candidates. He continued walking, past the front rows of nobility, past the council members, into the crowd of lesser vampires and servants, straight toward Isolde. No, this couldn't be happening. Isolde's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. He couldn't be walking toward her. There must be someone else. But the hall was parting, creating a path, and there was no one else in this corner. No one except the Dampier servant in her blood-stained dress, swaying with exhaustion. Caspian stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, close enough that the entire assembled kingdom could witness this impossible moment. Isolde Ravenshade, he said, his voice pitched for her ears alone, but in absolute silence every vampire could hear clearly. Your courage last night, your dedication to healing our wounded, your quiet strength in the face of decades of rejection. These are the qualities I seek in the one who would stand beside me as queen. Isolde stared at him. This had to be a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. Your Majesty, I don't understand, she stammered. A slight smile touched his lips. I'm asking you to be my Queen Isolde, my consort, my equal partner in ruling this kingdom. The words echoed in the silent hall. Impossible words. But she stopped herself before saying defective. I can't drink human blood. The kingdom would never accept. Something dark flashed in his eyes. Your inability to drink human blood has nothing to do with your worth or your strength. As for the kingdom accepting you, he glanced back at the gathered vampires. His expression made clear what would happen to anyone who questioned his choice. They will accept my decision, or they will find themselves seeking shelter elsewhere. Isolde's mind reeled. She could see Morgana's face contorted with rage, could see shock on every noble's features, could feel 500 pairs of eyes boring into her. "Why me?" she asked, voice barely audible. "There are so many others, more suitable." Caspian's hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't move, his cool fingers brushed her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "Because when everyone else was panicking or fighting for glory, you were saving lives," he said quietly. "Because you risked yourself to bring healing to those who had shown you nothing but cruelty. Because despite decades of being treated as lesser, you have developed compassion and strength that no pure blood in this hall possesses." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "And because from the moment I scented your blood 3 years ago, I knew with absolute certainty that you were meant to be mine." The conviction in his voice, the unwavering certainty in his ancient eyes shattered something inside Isolde, a small, fragile hope she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. "I don't know what to say," she whispered truthfully. His lips curved into a smile that transformed his stern features. "Say yes. Say you'll be my queen. My partner in building a kingdom where strength is measured not just in bloodline or combat ability, but in compassion, intelligence, and courage." The ceremonial hall remained deathly silent, hundreds of vampires waiting, hundreds of futures hanging on her answer. Isolde's fingers found her mother's pendant once more. She could almost feel her mother's presence, almost hear her voice. "Your difference will be your strength." "Yes," Isolde said, her voice grew stronger with each word. "Yes, I will be your queen, your partner, your equal." A collective gasp rose from the assembled vampires, followed immediately by confused murmurs and whispers. But Caspian seemed oblivious to their reaction. His face broke into a genuine smile. Before Isolde could register what was happening, he had swept her into his arms. One strong arm under her knees, the other supporting her back, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. She gasped, her arms automatically going around his neck for balance. "Your Majesty, what are you about now?" "Following tradition," he said, crimson eyes gleaming with something that looked suspiciously like mischief. "The king always carries his chosen queen to the throne to complete the ritual." He turned and began walking back through the parted crowd. Isolde caught glimpses of expressions: shock, confusion, disapproval, and from Morgana pure hatred. Her amber eyes promised retribution. Isolde tightened her arms around Caspian's neck, suddenly afraid. Not for herself, but for what her acceptance might mean for him. "They don't approve," she whispered against his ear. "This could weaken your position." His arms tightened around her. "Let me worry about that. For now, just be here with me." They reached the throne. Instead of setting her down, Caspian sat with her, still cradled in his arms. Her body rested across his lap, her head naturally falling against his shoulder. She could feel the solid muscle beneath his formal coat, could hear the steady, slow beating of his ancient heart. Elder Theron approached, expression carefully neutral, though surprise flickered in his ancient eyes. He carried the ceremonial chalice, larger, more ornately decorated with symbols of moon and blood. "King Caspian has made his choice," Elder Theron announced. "As is our tradition, they will share the sacred wine, binding their spirits together under the blessing of the blood moon." He held out the chalice. Caspian took it with one hand, his other arm still supporting Isolde. He raised the chalice to his lips first, as tradition dictated, and took a long drink. His eyes never left hers. Then he held the chalice to her lips. The wine was sweet and heavy on her tongue, not blood, but sacred vintage fermented from shadow berries and midnight flowers. It warmed her from the inside as it traveled down her throat. "With this shared drink, the king and his chosen queen begin their bond," Elder Theron intoned. "May the blood moon bless their union and strengthen our kingdom through their partnership." Isolde expected Caspian to set her aside then. Protocol demanded certain distance, certain formality. Instead, he shifted her slightly in his arms, positioning her more comfortably against his chest. Her head naturally came to rest on his shoulder. She could feel the warmth of his body through fabric, could hear the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear. The exhaustion she had been fighting for 3 days suddenly crashed over her like a wave. Her eyelids grew impossibly heavy. Her limbs relaxed against him, almost against her will. No, she couldn't fall asleep. Not now, not during the most important moment of her life. Not in front of 500 witnesses who already thought her unworthy. She fought it, tried to keep her eyes open, tried to focus on Elder Theron's words as he continued the ritual, blessing their union and calling upon the kingdom to accept their new queen. But Caspian's arms were so strong, so steady, so safe. and she was so tired. Rest, he whispered, his lips brushing against her hair. The words were so quiet only she could hear. I have you. Isolde tried to protest, tried to stay awake, but her body had reached its limit. The shock of being chosen. The overwhelming comfort of Caspian's embrace. Her eyes drifted closed. Just for a moment, she told herself. Just while Elder Theron finished the blessing. But the darkness pulled her down, warm and safe and irresistible. Her breathing slowed, deepened. Her body went completely relaxed in Caspian's arms. The hall fell into stunned silence. Isolde Ravenshade, the newly chosen Blood Queen of Nightvale, had fallen asleep. In the middle of her own coronation ceremony, in the Vampire King's arms, in front of the entire assembled kingdom. Elder Theron stopped mid-sentence, staring in disbelief. The nobles exchanged shocked glances. Someone in the back let out a strangled gasp. Caspian looked down at the woman sleeping peacefully against his shoulder, at the dark lashes resting against pale cheeks, at the gentle wisant fall of her chest, at the complete trust evident in every relaxed line of her body. Something fierce and protective surged through him, something he hadn't felt in 3 centuries of existence. He adjusted his hold slightly, cradling her more securely. His chin came to rest gently on top of her head. When he looked up at the shocked assembly, his crimson eyes blazed with warning. Continue, he said to Elder Theron. His voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. My queen has spent 3 days and nights serving this kingdom without rest. She has earned her sleep. The ceremony will proceed. Elder Theron hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then with visible effort, he resumed the ritual. His voice wavered slightly, but he pushed through, blessing the union, calling upon the blood moon, declaring Isolde Ravenshade the rightful queen of Nightvale. Through it all, Caspian sat perfectly still, holding his sleeping queen, daring anyone to comment, to question, to show anything but acceptance. The whispers started soft but grew louder. She fell asleep. During her own ceremony. Has this ever happened before? What does it mean? Caspian's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. It means she trusts me completely, enough to be vulnerable in my arms before 500 witnesses, and that my court is the greatest gift a queen can give her king. He rose to his feet with fluid grace, still cradling Isolde's sleeping form. She made a small sound, her arms tightening around his neck, even in sleep. The ceremony is complete, he announced. Isolde Ravenshade is your queen. Any who question this choice may bring their concerns to me directly. The threat was unmistakable. No one spoke. Caspian turned and carried his sleeping queen toward the private royal chambers. The crowd parted before him. He could feel their shock, their confusion, their disapproval. He didn't care. He had waited 3 years for this. 3 years since he had first scented her blood at the spring festival and known with absolute certainty that she was his true mate. 3 years of watching from afar, waiting for her to grow strong enough, ready enough to stand beside him. He hadn't expected her to fall asleep during their bonding, but somehow it was perfect. It proved what he had always known, that beneath the self-doubt and fear Isolde Ravenshade possessed strength that no pure blood could match. The strength to trust, to be vulnerable, to surrender completely. As he carried her through the castle corridors, servants and guards pressed themselves against walls staring. Let them stare. Let them whisper. By tomorrow, the entire kingdom would know that their king had chosen the Dhampir who couldn't drink blood, the one who had fallen asleep in his arms. And soon, very soon, they would learn that she was exactly what Nightvale needed. Caspian reached his private chambers and nudged the door open with his shoulder. The room beyond was vast, luxurious, dominated by a massive bed draped in midnight silk. He laid Isolde gently on the bed, her dark hair spreading across the pillows. She murmured something in her sleep, reaching for him as he started to pull away. Without thinking, he caught her hand and held it, her fingers curled around his. Even unconscious, she sought his touch. Caspian stood there for a long moment, watching her sleep, memorizing the peaceful expression on her face, the slight smile touching her lips, the complete trust evident in her relaxed features. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Morgana and her allies would plot. The council would object. Enemies would see his choice as weakness, but tonight he had won. He had claimed his queen, and she had chosen him back, even if she had been asleep for half of it. A smile touched his lips as he finally released her hand and moved to the chair by the fireplace. He wouldn't sleep, couldn't sleep with potential threats still lurking, but he would watch over her, protect her, just as he would for the rest of her life. Outside the windows, the blood moon began to set. Dawn approached. A new era for Night Vale Kingdom. An era that had begun with a sleeping vampire and a patient king. And nothing would ever be the same. Darkness, warmth, the scent of midnight flowers and ancient parchment. Isolde woke slowly, consciousness returning in gentle waves. For a blessed moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Couldn't remember anything except the overwhelming relief of deep, dreamless sleep. Then reality crashed back. The ceremony, the attack, Caspian choosing her, falling asleep in his arms. Her eyes flew open. She sat up so fast the room spun. Silk sheets pooled around her waist, still wearing her blood-stained servant's dress. But the room, this wasn't her tiny chamber in the servants' quarters. This was a palace. Floor-to-ceiling windows draped in midnight velvet, a fireplace large enough to stand in. Furniture carved from blackwood and inlaid with silver, tapestries depicting vampire history, and the bed massive carved with intricate designs of moons and thorns. The royal chambers. She was in the Vampire King's private rooms. "You're awake." Isolde's head whipped toward the voice. Caspian sat in a high-backed chair near the fireplace watching her. He had changed from ceremonial clothes into simpler attire. A black shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders, dark pants, but he looked no less powerful. "How long?" Her voice came out rough from sleep. 18 hours. 18 hours. She had slept for 18 hours. In the king's bed, while the entire kingdom was probably in chaos. Isolde's mind raced. This was wrong. All of this was wrong. She'd fallen asleep during her own coronation, made a spectacle of herself, humiliated the king who'd chosen her. But as she looked at Caspian, she saw no anger in those crimson eyes, no disappointment, just patience, and something that looked almost like admiration. "The kingdom must think I'm pathetic," she said quietly, falling asleep during the ceremony. Everyone saw. "They saw you trust me enough to be vulnerable," Caspian said calmly. "They saw their queen who had earned her rest after saving 32 lives. Isolde wanted to believe that, but years of conditioning couldn't be undone in a single night. "You can't possibly believe that's what they're saying." A slight smile touched his lips. "What they say in private is irrelevant. What matters is what they say to my face. And to my face, they have been appropriately respectful." The emphasis on appropriately made clear what had happened to anyone who hadn't been respectful. Isolde's stomach twisted. This was the reality of what she'd accepted. The politics, the power dynamics, the weight of a crown she wasn't prepared to wear. A small voice in her head, the voice that sounded like her mother, whispered, "You saved 32 vampires while others slept. You survived an attack while covered in blood. You chose to stay when you could have run. That took strength, maybe, but it would take more than one night of healing to prove she deserved this crown." "I shouldn't be here," Isolde said, climbing out of the bed on the unsteady legs. "This isn't proper. We're not bonded. We haven't completed the ritual." "Until what?" Caspian rose from his chair with fluid grace. "Until we complete the blood bond. That's a choice we'll make together when you're ready. Until then, you are my chosen queen. This is your home now." He moved closer, not threatening, but deliberate. When he stopped, he was close enough that Isolde had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "The kingdom is in uproar," she whispered. "First you choose a Dampier, then she falls asleep during the ceremony. Every tradition we have is being violated." "Good," Caspian said simply. "Those traditions have kept us stagnant for centuries. It's time for change." Isolde shook her head. "You don't understand what you're risking. There will be challenges, rebellions, political maneuvering. Let them try." The quiet confidence in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it terrified her, because she understood vampire politics. Power was maintained through careful alliances and displays of strength. Choosing the weakest Dampier in the kingdom was neither. "Why me?" she asked again. But this time she needed the real answer. "You could have had Morgana. She would have strengthened your rule." Caspian's hand came up to cup her face. "I've known you were my true mate since the spring festival 3 years ago." Isolde searched her memory. 3 years ago, she would have been 19. Servants worked behind the scenes at festivals. "You were helping an elderly vampire woman find her way back to her family," Caspian continued. "She was confused, disoriented. Other servants ignored her, but you took her hand and walked her through the entire festival until you found her grandson." The memory surfaced, an old woman with clouded eyes, lost and frightened. Isolde had spent an hour guiding her. "That's when I scented your blood," Caspian said, "and knew. True mate bonds are rare, Isolde. Perhaps 1 in 10,000 vampires ever experiences one. Your scent called to something primal in me, something I thought had died centuries ago. His other hand found her waist. But you were young, 19 and still finding your place. So I waited, watched, made sure that when I claimed you, it would be because you were ready to stand beside me as my equal. Isolde's heart hammered against her ribs. True mates, the story said it was like finding your other half. I can't feel it, she whispered. The bond. Not yet. The bond strengthens when consummated, when we exchange blood and join completely. But you will feel it, Isolde, I promise. Before she could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the chamber. Caspian's expression darkened. He moved to the door with predatory speed. This had better be important, he said, opening it to reveal a guard. Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty, but General Blackwater has called an emergency council meeting. He's demanding your presence. And the guard's eyes flickered to Isolde. He's requesting the Queen's attendance as well. Isolde's blood ran cold. Morgana's father, head of the royal guard and one of the most powerful nobles. If he was calling an emergency meeting, it meant challenge. Caspian's jaw tightened. Tell the council we'll be there within the hour. The guard bowed and left. Caspian turned back to Isolde. You don't have to attend, he said. I can face them alone. Isolde thought about it, thought about hiding while Caspian defended his choice, while the council questioned her worth. Then she thought about her mother, Minerva Ravenshade, who had faced down a sunlight curse to save the king's sister, who had never hidden from those who thought her lesser. If I'm going to be queen, Isolde thought, I need to face them. All of them. No, she said aloud. Her voice was steady despite her fear. If I'm going to wear this crown, I need to prove I deserve it. Caspian's smile was fierce, proud. Then let's show them exactly what kind of queen they're getting. The council chamber was a vast circular room deep in the castle's heart. 12 high-backed chairs arranged around an obsidian table, each occupied by one of Night Vale's most powerful vampires. And standing at the head of the table, General Thaddeus Blackwater, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes like frozen amber. Scars crisscrossed his face and hands. He wore his military regalia medals gleaming. His daughter Morgana stood beside him, beautiful face carefully neutral. But Isolde could see the hatred burning in her amber eyes. Every council member turned as Caspian entered with Isolde. She wore a simple dark dress that Caspian's attendants had provided. Her mother's pendant hung at her throat, the one piece of armor she possessed. The stares felt like physical weight. Isolde lifted her chin and met them head-on. Your Majesty, Thaddeus said, voice carefully respectful. Thank you for joining us. We have matters of grave importance to discuss. Then discuss them, Caspian said. He moved to the king's chair at the head of the table. Then deliberately he pulled out the chair beside it, the queen's chair, and looked at Isolde. She felt every eye in the room on her as she walked forward, felt their shock as she sat in a chair no Dampier had ever touched. The council believes your choice requires reconsideration, Thaddeus began carefully. There is no precedent, interrupted Counselor Vesper, an ancient vampire woman with white hair, because it violates every standard we have for bloodline purity. The girl can't even drink human blood, added Counselor Draven, heavyset with jowls that shook. How can she provide proper heirs? Isolde felt her face burn, but she kept her expression neutral. Her bloodline is irrelevant, Caspian said coldly. I have made my choice. The ceremony is complete. This is not a discussion. But surely you see the political ramifications, Thaddeus pressed. Neighboring kingdoms will view this as weakness. Our enemies will be emboldened. We killed 47 Shadow Fang warriors, Caspian cut in, voice dropping to a dangerous purr. Sent the rest fleeing. How exactly does that project weakness? Silence fell. The council members exchanged glances, testing boundaries. The people are talking. Morgana spoke for the first time, voice silk over steel. They say the new queen couldn't even stay awake for her own coronation. That she's so weak she fell asleep in front of the entire kingdom. The words hit like knives. Isolde's hands clenched in her lap, and something inside her snapped. Years of being called defective, years of accepting it, believing it, hiding while others shone. No more, she thought fiercely. No more hiding. You're right, Isolde said quietly. Every head turned toward her. I did fall asleep. Do you know why? She stood slowly, met Morgana's amber eyes without flinching. Because I had spent 3 days without rest tending sick vampires in the dungeons. Vampires no one else would touch. Then I spent the attack healing 32 wounded warriors, using knowledge from my mother's journals. Skills that none of your precious purebloods possess. Her voice grew stronger. I fell asleep because I trusted my king to protect me. Because after a lifetime of vigilance, of never letting my guard down, I finally felt safe enough to rest. If you see that as weakness, then you fundamentally misunderstand what strength is. She turned to address the entire council. You say I can't provide proper heirs. You don't know that. My mother Minerva was researching bloodline variations before she died. Her journals contain information about Dhampir traits that might surprise you. Isolde reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. Her mother's journal. She placed it on the obsidian table. My mother was developing a cure for sun sensitivity. She believed Dhampirs might be the key to ending our eternal night, that our mixed blood could eventually lead to daywalking. Gasps echoed around the table. Daywalking was forbidden discussion. That's blasphemy, Counselor Draven sputtered. Vampires are creatures of night. It's our curse, Isolde interrupted. One my mother believed could be broken. She died before completing her research. But I've continued it. I've tested her theories. And I'm close to proving she was right. She met Caspian's eyes, saw surprise there. He hadn't known about this. So yes, Isolde said, turning back to the council. I fell asleep during my coronation. But I'm also the daughter of Minerva Ravenshade, who saved the king's sister. I'm a healer who has saved more lives than most of you combined, and I might just be the key to transforming our entire species. The silence that followed was absolute. Thaddeus recovered first. Bold words, but words are meaningless without proof. The council cannot accept a queen based on empty promises. Then test me, Isolde said. Give me a challenge, any challenge. Let me prove my worth. Morgana's eyes gleamed. Isolde realized too late she had walked into a trap. Very well, Morgana said, stepping forward. I invoke trial by blood. As is my right under ancient law, I challenge the queen's worthiness through combat. The council erupted, some protesting, others nodding approval. Caspian rose from his chair, rage written across his features. Absolutely not. The trial by blood hasn't been used in 2 centuries. It's law, Vesper said quietly, and the queen offered herself for testing. Morgana has the right to invoke it. Caspian's hands gripped the table edge hard enough to crack obsidian. Isolde isn't a warrior. Morgana has trained for combat her entire life. This isn't a test. It's an execution. Then perhaps the king should have chosen more carefully, Thaddeus said coldly. Isolde felt the political chess game closing around her. If she refused, she would be seen as weak. If she accepted, she would likely die. But if she refused, Caspian's authority would be undermined. I accept, Isolde said clearly. No. Caspian turned to her. I won't allow this. You can't stop it, Vesper said. Once invoked and accepted, the trial must proceed. It's binding law. Isolde met Caspian's crimson eyes, saw the fear there, the desperate need to protect her. But she also saw what he couldn't admit, that this was necessary, that her reign would never be legitimate without proving herself. I accept, she repeated, louder. When and where, Morgana smiled, not pleasantly. 3 days, the blood arena, public combat before the entire kingdom, victory to the death or submission. 3 days. Isolde had 3 days to learn how to fight a vampire warrior who had spent decades mastering combat. But as she looked around the council chamber at the doubt in their eyes, the contempt barely concealed, she knew there was no other choice. She was going to prove herself, or die trying. The next 3 days passed in brutal training. Caspian cleared his schedule working with Isolde personally. You can't match her strength or speed, he said as they sparred in the private training room. So don't try. Use your intelligence, your knowledge of anatomy from healing work. Find weaknesses. He demonstrated pressure points, vulnerable arteries, ways to use an opponent's momentum against them. Isolde absorbed it all. Her muscles screamed. Her body protested every movement, but she pushed through. On the second day of training, as they took a brief rest, Caspian knelt beside her. Let me stop this, he said quietly. I'll exile Morgana and her father. End this before it begins. And lose the council's support. Make enemies of half the nobility. Start a potential civil war. Isolde shook her head. I have to do this. I didn't choose you out of pity, Caspian said fiercely. I chose you because you're my mate, my equal. A scream from the corridor cut him off. They both ran toward the sound, found servants clustered around the queen's chambers. Inside the breakfast tray lay shattered, and Lady Helena, one of the twin candidates from the ceremony, writhing in agony. Foam flecked her lips. Her skin had turned gray. Poison, Isolde said immediately. She dropped to her knees beside Helena. Silver root and something else. She looked at the breakfast tray. Tea, toast, honey, all things meant for her. Someone had tried to poison the queen. Isolde's healing instincts took over. She barked orders, demanded antidotes, worked with desperate speed to save Helena's life. As she did, her mind raced. The poison was sophisticated, designed specifically to kill Dampiers. Purebloods like Helena would survive, though barely. But Isolde would have died within minutes. She looked up and found Morgana standing in the doorway, watching. Their eyes met, and Isolde saw it. The flash of surprise, disappointment. Morgana had expected to find Isolde dead, but the plan had failed. Helena had eaten from Isolde's tray first, trying to be helpful, and now lay dying instead. A plan formed in Isolde's mind, dangerous, but it might be her only chance. She worked through the night, saving Helena's life, used every technique in her mother's journals. When dawn came, Helena was stable, and Isolde had confirmed the poison's components. A formal dinner was held in Isolde's honor, a chance for nobility to meet their new queen before the trial. The great hall filled with vampires in their finest attire. Isolde wore a deep crimson gown that Caspian had chosen. She took her seat at the high table, Caspian on one side, General Thaddeus on the other. Morgana sat across from her, beautiful and cold as ice. Servants brought goblets of blood wine. As the dinner progressed, Isolde watched Morgana, studied her movements, waited. It came during the third course, a toast to the upcoming trial. Morgana lifted her goblet with a smile, but Isolde saw her eyes flicker to Isolde's drink, saw the anticipation there. In that moment, Isolde knew. Morgana had poisoned her wine, was waiting to watch her die publicly. Isolde lifted her goblet, smiled at Morgana, and in one smooth motion as she gestured while speaking, accidentally knocked Morgana's goblet with her own. The drink sloshed, mixed slightly. "Oh, how clumsy of me," Isolde said. "Please take mine, I insist." She handed her poisoned goblet to Morgana while taking Morgana's safe one. The switch happened so fast, so smoothly, that no one noticed except Morgana herself. Their eyes locked. Morgana's face went white. She understood. Morgana had three choices: refuse and expose her assassination attempt, drink and die, or drink and hope Isolde was bluffing. Pride won. Morgana raised the goblet to her lips, took a long drink. Her expression said she was calling Isolde's bluff. She was wrong. Within minutes, Morgana's skin began to turn gray. She stood abruptly, swaying. Her father caught her as she collapsed, foam flecking her lips. The hall erupted in chaos. Isolde was already moving. "The poison is silver root mixed with nightshade extract," she called out. "I need the antidote from the apothecary. Now." She knelt beside Morgana, working with desperate speed. "Why?" Morgana gasped as Isolde forced medicine down her throat. "Why save me?" "Because I'm queen," Isolde said quietly, "and that means protecting all my subjects, even the ones who try to kill me." She worked through the night, used every technique, every remedy, pushed herself past exhaustion, and saved Morgana's life. When dawn came, Morgana lay weak but alive in the healing chambers. Isolde sat beside her bed, exhausted but victorious. Caspian stood in the doorway. "The poison was meant for you," he said quietly. "I know. You switched the goblets." "I did, and then saved her life anyway." Isolde looked at the woman who had tried to kill her twice. "Because she's not the real enemy. She's being used, manipulated by someone who wants to destabilize your rule." She met Caspian's eyes. "Find out who's really behind this. Because Morgana isn't smart enough to create these poisons alone." The revelation came on the morning of the trial. Caspian's spies uncovered evidence in General Thaddeus's private quarters. Correspondence with Lord Constantine of the Shadowfang Coven. Plans for destabilization. Promises of power in exchange for delivering Nightvale. Thaddeus Blackwater, trusted general and council member, was a traitor, but they couldn't prove it publicly yet, not without risking civil war. So the trial would proceed as planned. The blood arena was an ancient stone circle carved into the mountain, open to the sky but surrounded by towering walls. 500 vampires filled the stands. Representatives from neighboring kingdoms watched from special boxes. The Dampier queen fighting the perfect pure blood for the right to rule. Isolde stood at one end of the arena, wearing simple leather armor. No weapons allowed, hand-to-hand combat only. She looked small, fragile, utterly outmatched. Across from her, Morgana gleamed in black armor. Despite her recent poisoning, she had recovered with vampire speed, was eager for revenge. Elder Theron stood in the center. By ancient law, Morgana Blackwater has challenged Queen Isolde Ravenshade to trial by blood. Combat will continue until death or submission. The victor's claim to the throne will be absolute. May the Blood Moon witness truth. He retreated to the edge, raised his hand, let it fall. The trial began. Morgana moved with blinding speed, crossed the arena in heartbeats. Her fist aimed for Isolde's face with enough force to shatter bone. Isolde barely dodged. The wind ruffled her hair. She stumbled backward. Morgana pressed the advantage. A flurry of strikes, each faster than the last. Isolde blocked what she could, took hits that drove air from her lungs, felt ribs crack. The crowd roared. Isolde went down hard, tasted blood. Morgana loomed over her. You should have refused. Now you'll die proving what everyone already knew, that you're not worthy. She raised her fist for the killing blow. Isolde's hand darted out, grabbed arena sand mixed with silver dust, the same dust that lines ceremonial chalices. Traditional in blood arenas as a test of pure vampire strength. She threw it directly in Morgana's eyes. Silver burned pure vampires. Morgana screamed, staggering back, clawing at her face. Isolde forced herself up, every movement agony, but she had one advantage. Her Dhampir blood gave her slight resistance to silver. She grabbed more silver dust, pressed it directly into the cuts on Morgana's arms from the earlier poison. Wounds that hadn't fully healed. Morgana's screams intensified. The silver burned from inside, weakened her vampire healing, slowed her supernatural speed. Isolde used every dirty trick Caspian had taught her. Pressure points, vulnerable joints, fighting smart instead of strong. The fight raged on, brutal, desperate. Isolde took damage that would have killed a human. But she kept moving, kept thinking, kept using the arena itself as a weapon. Finally, she got Morgana in a hold, a healer's hold designed to cut off blood flow to the brain without killing. Her arm around Morgana's throat, silver-dusted fingers pressing into vulnerable arteries. Submit, Isolde gasped. I don't want to kill you. Morgana struggled, but she was weakening. Submit, Isolde repeated. Please. The arena had gone silent. Morgana's hand tapped against Isolde's arm. Once. Twice. Submission. Isolde released her immediately. Morgana collapsed to the arena floor, gasping. Alive. Defeated but alive. The crowd erupted. Isolde stood over her fallen opponent. She should feel triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired and suspicious. She looked up at the stands, found General Thaddeus. His face was twisted with rage, but also calculation. He had expected his daughter to win, to kill Isolde, to pave the way for whatever plan he had. But Isolde had survived and proven herself capable. She opened her mouth to speak, to expose him before the entire kingdom. Your Majesty, a guard burst into the arena. Shadowfang forces at the eastern gate, hundreds of them, they're breaking through. Thaddeus smiled, just for a moment, just enough for Isolde to see, and she understood. This had all been planned. Distract the king with the trial, weaken the queen through combat, then attack when defenses were focused on the arena. Thaddeus was coordinating the invasion. The general is working with them, Isolde shouted. Thaddeus Blackwater is betraying us to Shadowfang. Every head turned toward the general. He stood calmly, too calmly. The Dhampir is delirious from combat, he said smoothly, obviously desperate to search his quarters, Isolde interrupted. You'll find correspondence with Lord Constantine, plans for tonight's attack. Caspian was already moving, already gesturing to guards. Do it! Search everything! Thaddeus's expression finally cracked. Rage replaced calculation. In one smooth motion, he drew a hidden blade, silver, poison-coated, and threw it directly at Isolde's heart. She was too exhausted to dodge, too broken from the fight to move fast enough. The blade was going to kill her. Then Caspian was there, moving faster than thought. He caught the blade midair, his hand smoking where silver touched flesh, and his other hand was around Thaddeus's throat. The Vampire King's eyes blazed crimson, ancient, furious, absolutely lethal. You tried to kill my queen, Caspian said quietly. Too quietly. You betrayed my kingdom, conspired with our enemies, poisoned my mate. His hand tightened. Thaddeus's feet left the ground. And for that you die. He didn't give Thaddeus time to speak, time to beg. Caspian's hand crushed inward. There was a wet tearing sound. Then Thaddeus Blackwater's head separated from his body. The general's corpse hit the arena floor, Blood pooled across sand. Caspian dropped the head beside it, turned to face the shocked crowd, his hands still smoking, his eyes still blazing. Anyone else want to question my queen's worthiness? His voice carried to every corner. Anyone else want to betray this kingdom? Silence. Then from the eastern walls, the sounds of battle. Shadowfang was attacking, without their inside man, without the element of surprise. Caspian looked at Isolde. Can you fight? She was broken, bleeding, could barely stand, but she nodded anyway. Then let's show them what happens when they threaten our home. He held out his hand. Isolde took it, let him pull her close. And together the vampire king and his Dampier queen turned to face the coming darkness. The real war was just beginning. The eastern walls of Night Vale Castle were burning. Greek fire, a substance that burned even stone, that couldn't be extinguished with water. Shadowfang vampires had brought it to turn ancient fortifications into death traps. Isolde stood on the ramparts beside Caspian. Below 200 Shadowfang warriors poured through the breach like a black tide. They moved with coordinated precision. This wasn't a raid. This was full invasion. And they had counted on Thaddeus opening the gates from inside. How long until sunrise? Isolde asked. Her voice was steady despite pain radiating from cracked ribs. Caspian glanced at the horizon. 2 hours, maybe less. 2 hours. Most vampires would retreat to lower chambers when dawn approached, hide from the sun that could turn them to ash. But Shadowfang was betting Night Vale's forces would do the same, would abandon the walls when light came. They were wrong. I have an idea, Isolde said, but you're not going to like it. Caspian turned to her. His crimson eyes blazed with battle fury. Blood stained his clothes. Tell me. Isolde pulled her mother's journal from inside her armor. The leather was worn, stained with her own blood from the arena fight. But the pages held secrets that could change everything. My mother was working on a formula, a way to weaponize sunlight. She believed Dampiers could handle brief exposure. She flipped to a page covered in Minerva's careful handwriting. Chemical formulas, alchemical symbols, instructions for creating liquid dawn. This compound, when ignited, creates UV light, not as intense as true sunlight, but enough to burn pure vampires, enough to give us an advantage. Caspian's expression darkened. And you, how much exposure can you handle? I don't know, Isolde admitted. My mother's research was incomplete, but I believe I can withstand more than pure bloods, maybe enough to turn the tide. She met his eyes, saw the war there, between his need to protect her and his responsibility to save their kingdom. We're losing, she said quietly. Shadowfang has numbers, surprise weapons. If we fight conventionally, they'll overwhelm us before dawn. But if we can hold them until sunrise, then use this. She tapped the journal. We might have a chance. Caspian was silent for a long moment. Around them, battle sounds raged. What do you need? He finally asked. The castle apothecary. Every alchemical ingredient we have, in 20 minutes. You have 30. I'll hold the walls. He cupped her face in his blood-stained hands. But if this doesn't work, if it hurts you, it will work, Isolde said with more confidence than she felt. My mother wouldn't have died protecting this research if it wasn't real. She kissed him, quick and fierce, tasting blood and desperation and something that might have been goodbye. Then she ran. The castle apothecary was chaos. Wounded vampires filled every surface. Healers worked frantically. But Isolde pushed through, grabbing ingredients with practiced efficiency. Silver root extract, moonflower essence, crushed diamond dust, and the rarest component, phoenix ash, smuggled from eastern kingdoms at impossible cost. Her hands moved with certainty born from years of studying her mother's work. Mixing, measuring, combining volatile substances that could explode if handled incorrectly. She created 12 vials of liquid dawn, not enough to arm an army, but enough for strategic strikes. As she worked, Morgana appeared in the doorway, battered from their arena fight, one eye swollen shut, bruises covering her perfect face. But standing, fighting despite her injuries. The king sent me, Morgana said stiffly. He wants you protected while you work. Isolde didn't look up from her mixing. I don't need protection. I need you on the walls. I'm following orders. Then help me carry these. Isolde gestured to the completed vials. Each one glowed with faint blue light, beautiful and deadly. Morgana approached slowly, stared at the vials with obvious suspicion. What is it? Weaponized sunlight. It will burn pure vampires. Kill them if the exposure is long enough. Isolde met her eyes. It will burn you too, but it won't kill me. That's my advantage. Something shifted in Morgana's expression. Not quite understanding, but perhaps the beginning of it. You're going to use yourself as bait, Morgana said. Draw them close. Take the burns while they die. Yes. That's insane. That's strategy. Isolde finished the last vial, stood. My mother died believing Dampiers were the future of our kind. I'm going to prove she was right. She handed Morgana 6 vials, kept 6 for herself. Give these to Caspian. Tell him to deploy them at breach points. When I signal, he ignites them all at once. What signal? Isolde smiled grimly. He'll know. Dawn was coming. Isolde could feel it in her blood, a warmth that pure vampires couldn't sense. She climbed to the highest tower, the one most exposed to the coming light. Below the battle raged. Shadowfang had taken the outer courtyard. Were pushing toward the inner keep. Caspian's forces were being driven back. Isolde uncorked one of her vials. Poured the liquid dawn over herself. It felt like ice against her skin. Then fire. Then something beyond description. The compound soaked into her clothes, her hair, her skin, turning her into a living weapon. She stepped to the edge of the tower, raised her arms, and screamed with everything she had. The sound cut through battle. Every head turned. Every warrior paused. They saw her, the Dampier Queen, glowing with blue light, standing in the open as the first rays of true dawn touched the horizon. Constantine! Her voice rang across the courtyard. Face me, or are you afraid? It was a challenge no vampire lord could ignore. The Shadowfang forces parted, and Lord Constantine emerged. Massive, taller than Caspian, broader, covered in scars from 1,000 battles. His eyes were black as void. His fangs extended past his chin. He was ancient, powerful, everything a vampire warlord should be. And he was laughing. The little Dampier wants to play. His voice was gravel and broken glass. Very well, I'll make your death quick. He launched himself upward, climbing the tower with inhuman speed, reaching for Isolde with claws that could tear through steel. Isolde didn't move, didn't flinch, just waited. Constantine grabbed her throat, lifted her off her feet, and screamed. The liquid dawn on her skin burned him where they touched. His hand blistered, smoked. The scent of burning flesh filled the air. He dropped her, stared at his ruined hand in disbelief. What is this? He snarled. My mother's gift. Isolde gasped. Her throat was crushed. Speaking was agony. You wanted to kill the Dampier. Here I am. She grabbed him, her hands wrapped around his wrists. The liquid dawn transferring from her skin to his, burning, blistering, eating through his ancient flesh like acid. Constantine roared, threw her off. She slammed into the tower wall hard enough to crack stone, felt her spine compress, tasted blood. But she smiled anyway, because the sun was rising. True dawn, light spilling across the battlefield, and she was standing in it. The sunlight hit Isolde like a physical force, pain beyond anything she had ever experienced. Her skin blistered, smoked, started to burn, but she didn't turn to ash, didn't die. Her Dampier blood protected her. Just barely, just enough. Constantine wasn't so lucky. The ancient vampire lord caught in the open as daylight claimed the sky. He had seconds before burning would begin. Had to retreat or die. He chose retreat, dove from the tower, landed in the courtyard, scrambled for the shadows of the inner keep. Now, Isolde screamed. Caspian heard. Of course he heard. He had been watching every second. The 6 vials of liquid dawn detonated simultaneously. At every breach point, every shadow where Shadowfang forces had taken cover, UV light exploded outward in brilliant blue waves. Shadowfang vampires screamed, burned. Those caught directly in the light turned to ash within seconds. Those on the edges scrambled away, fled back through the breached walls, abandoned the invasion in complete chaos. The battle turned in an instant, from desperate defense to absolute victory. Isolde collapsed on the tower. The sun was fully up now, burning her, killing her by inches. She tried to crawl toward the stairs, toward safety, but her limbs wouldn't obey. She had proven her point, proven her worth. But the cost was going to be her life. Then Caspian was there, appearing from nowhere, wrapping her in thick blankets that blocked the light, lifting her with impossible gentleness. I have you, he whispered. I have you. He carried her down into darkness, into safety. And Isolde finally let herself surrender to the pain. She woke 3 days later. The burns had been severe, Third degree, over 40% of her body. She should have died, would have died if she had been fully human. But her Dampier blood saved her, healing faster than possible, knitting skin back together, leaving scars that would fade with time. Isolde opened her eyes to find herself in Caspian's chambers. He sat beside the bed, hadn't left, hadn't slept. His crimson eyes were shadowed with exhaustion and fear. "You're awake," he said, his voice cracked slightly. "Did we win?" Isolde's throat was raw. "Complete victory. Constantine fled with maybe 30 survivors. The rest are dead or captured." Caspian's hand found hers. "You magnificent, insane, brilliant woman. You stood in sunlight. Actually stood in it." "For about 90 seconds before I started dying," Isolde said wryly. "It's a start." He leaned forward. "I've had scholars examining your mother's research. The liquid dawn formula. The theories about Dampier sun resistance. Isolde, if this is real, if you can develop true immunity, we could reclaim the day," Isolde finished. "I know. It's what my mother dreamed of." She tried to sit up, gasped as pain lanced through her burned skin. Caspian immediately helped her, propped pillows behind her back, held a cup of water to her lips. "There's more," he said carefully. "Elder Vesper found something in the archives, an ancient text that mentions Dampiers. It calls them daywalkers. The prophecy speaks of them, says that the tainted queen will end the eternal night. It means liberation," Isolde breathed, "not ending vampires, ending the curse that keeps us in darkness." Caspian nodded. "Your mother wasn't just researching for curiosity, she was fulfilling prophecy, and you've proven it's possible. You survived direct sunlight, with time, with training, with refinement of the formula. I could walk in daylight fully, and teach others how to do the same." The implications were staggering. "We could be whole again. You could be what vampires were always meant to become," Caspian said. "Evolution, not curse." A knock at the door interrupted them. Caspian growled in irritation. "I said no disturbances." "It's important, Your Majesty." The guard's voice was apologetic. "Morgana Blackwater requests an audience with the Queen." Isolde and Caspian exchanged glances. Morgana, whose father had been executed for treason, who had challenged Isolde to a death match, who had every reason to hate the Dampier, who had taken everything from her. "Send her in," Isolde said. The door opened. Morgana entered. She looked different, smaller somehow, the arrogance stripped away. Her beautiful face was still bruised from their fight. She stopped at the foot of the bed, met Isolde's eyes. "I came to apologize," Morgana said. The words clearly cost her. "For the poisoning, the challenge, the years of cruelty. You saved my life twice when you should have let me die. I don't understand why." "Because we were friends once," Isolde said simply. "Before bloodlines and politics and fear got in the way. I remember the girl who braided my hair, who shared her sweets, who told me I was special." Morgana's eyes glistened. "That girl was weak. I killed her to become strong." "No, you killed her to become what others expected. There's a difference, right?" Isolde held out her hand. "The question is whether she's truly dead or just buried." Morgana stared at the offered hand, at the burns still healing on Isolde's skin. She knelt, took Isolde's hand in both of hers, pressed her forehead to it in the ancient gesture of absolute fealty. "I pledge myself to you," Morgana said, "not because you're queen, but because you're everything I should have been, strong in the ways that matter." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I don't ask for forgiveness. I just ask for a chance to serve, to prove I can be better than my father raised me to be." Isolde lifted Morgana's chin. "I'm creating something new. A guard for Dampiers and vampires who don't fit the old molds, who are evolving past ancient prejudices. I need someone to lead them, someone who understands what it's like to be trapped by expectations." "You want me to protect the outcasts?" Morgana's voice was disbelieving. "After everything I've done, I want you to protect the future." Isolde smiled. "What better way to prove you've changed than by defending those you once scorned?" Morgana nodded slowly. "I won't let you down." "I know." The proper coronation ceremony took place when Isolde's burns had healed enough, when the castle had been repaired, when the kingdom had time to process everything. This time there was no attack, no interruption, no chaos. Just Isolde walking down the center aisle of the grand hall in a gown of deepest midnight blue. Not the simple servant's dress she had worn before, but not overly ornate either. Elegant, dignified, worthy of a queen who had earned her crown through fire and blood. The assembled vampires rose as she passed, some with genuine respect, others with grudging acceptance, all with the knowledge that she had saved them, had stood in sunlight and survived, had proven herself in every way that mattered. Caspian waited at the altar, wearing his ceremonial robes, looking every inch the vampire king. But when his eyes met hers, they softened, filled with something that looked suspiciously like worship. Elder Vesper performed the ritual, the same words she had spoken before. But this time Isolde was awake, present, actively choosing. Do you, Isolde Ravenshade, accept the burden of queen, the responsibility of our people, the partnership with our king? I do. Her voice rang clear, unwavering. Do you, Caspian Thornwood, accept this woman as your equal, your partner, your queen in all things? I do. His voice was fierce, absolute. Then by the power of the blood moon and the ancient laws, I declare you bonded, king and queen, partners in darkness and light. But Isolde raised her hand. If I may, there's one more element I'd like to add. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Speak, Vesper said cautiously. Isolde turned to Caspian, took his hand. Traditionally, the king claims his queen through the blood bond. He drinks from her, marks her as his. But we're building something new, a kingdom of equals, of evolution. She drew a small ceremonial blade from her sleeve. Silver, the metal that could harm vampires. She pressed it to her palm, drew blood, held it out. I offer my blood freely, but I also claim my right to yours. She offered him the blade. The symbolism was clear. Caspian smiled, took the blade without hesitation, cut his own palm, blood well dark and ancient. We are equals, he said loudly enough for the entire hall to hear. In all things, including this. They pressed their bleeding palms together. Isolde felt power surge through the contact, ancient, primal. The true mate bond awakening fully for the first time. Then Caspian brought her hand to his lips, drank from her cut, his eyes never leaving hers, and Isolde did the same, tasted his blood for the first time. It was nothing like the human blood that made her sick. This was different, spiced with power and time and something that sang to her very soul. The bond snapped into place, complete, unbreakable. She could feel him now, his emotions, his thoughts at the surface level, the overwhelming love, the fierce protectiveness, the pride in what she had become, and he could feel her strength, her determination, the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. It's done, Vesper said, wonder in her ancient voice. The bond is complete. They are truly one. The hall erupted, not in whispers or uncertain applause, but in genuine celebration, cheering, howling, accepting. Morgana stood at the front leading the noise, tears streaming down her face as she witnessed the queen she had tried to kill being crowned in triumph. Isolde looked out at her kingdom, at the vampires and dampires who were her responsibility now. She raised her voice. I stand before you as your queen. Not because of bloodline, not because of tradition, but because I bled for you, burned for you, proved myself worthy in every trial. She held up her scarred hands. I am Dampier, but I am also your future. My mother died believing that our curse could be broken, that we could reclaim the day, walk in sunlight without fear, and I've proven it's possible. She gestured to Caspian. Together, your king and I will build a new kingdom, one that values innovation over tradition, strength of character over purity of blood, where Dampiers and purebloods work as equals toward a shared future. Her voice grew stronger, more passionate. I'm not a perfect queen. I will make mistakes. I will stumble, but I will never stop fighting for you. Never stop working toward the day when we can walk freely, live fully, be more than we ever dreamed possible. The cheering intensified, foot stamping, fangs bared in approval. Caspian took her hand, raised it high. King and queen united. The Minerva Ravenshade Institute for Blood Alchemy opened in the restored Eastern Wing. 20 Dampiers from neighboring kingdoms sought sanctuary, came to study under Isolde. Morgana proved herself as head of the Royal Guard, protecting those she had once scorned with fierce dedication. The conservative nobles adapted or left. Those who remained discovered that progress didn't mean chaos. Isolde spent her mornings in sunlight, building resistance, extending her time, each day a little longer, and the kingdom thrived. On a crisp autumn morning, a young Dampier girl arrived at the castle gates. She was 14, terrified, convinced her mixed blood made her worthless. Isolde greeted her personally. The girl's name was Astrid. "I can't drink blood," Astrid sobbed. "Everyone says I'm broken." Isolde knelt before her. "I couldn't drink blood either. I thought I was broken too. But I learned something important. Our difference isn't a curse. It's a gift." She gestured around the hall, at the tapestries showing her standing in sunlight. "You and I, Astrid, we're not broken. We're what comes next." She held out her hand. "Let me show you." Astrid took her hand, hope dawning for the first time. Isolde led her to the eastern balcony, where morning light touched the stone. "Watch," Isolde said, and she stepped into full sunlight. 3 months of daily exposure. 3 months of building resistance. She could stand in direct sun for nearly an hour now before needing to retreat. She wasn't fully immune yet, but she was close. Astrid gasped, stared at Isolde bathed in golden light, alive, whole, powerful. "Someday," Isolde said, "with training and patience and courage, you could do this too." Caspian watched from the shadows, pride radiating through their bond. That evening, after Astrid had been settled, Isolde and Caspian returned to their private balcony. It had become their ritual, meeting at the boundary of light and dark. The sun was setting. Isolde stood in the fading light, Caspian in the growing shadows, their hands intertwined at the threshold. "Do you ever regret it?" Isolde asked. "Choosing me, the broken Dampier who turned your kingdom upside down?" Caspian pulled her close, kissed her forehead, her scarred hands. "Every day I fall more in love with you," he said. "Every day I watch you prove that strength has nothing to do with bloodline." He cupped her face. "You fell asleep in my arms during our coronation, in front of 500 witnesses. And in that moment you showed more trust than I've received in 300 years. His voice grew rough with emotion. "I didn't choose you despite your differences, Isolde. I chose you because of them. Because you're everything I'm not. Everything this kingdom needs. Everything I need." Isolde kissed him, soft and deep, tasting forever. When they finally parted, the sun had set, night claimed the sky, but tomorrow dawn would come again, and Isolde would be there to meet it. She looked out at the kingdom spread below, at the lights beginning to glow, at the vampires and Dampiers moving through streets without fear. "They said I was tainted," she said softly, "too broken to lead. They laughed when I fell asleep during the ceremony." She turned to Caspian, to her mate, her equal, her partner. "But sleeping in your arms was the first real rest I'd had in 22 years. The first moment I felt truly safe, truly valued, truly home." She looked back at the darkening sky. "I woke up to a world where I was queen, where my scars were badges of honor, where being different made me perfect for the role I was meant to play." Her voice strengthened. "They were wrong about me, about Dampiers, about what it means to be strong, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that." She raised her scarred hands to the emerging stars. "I am Isolde Ravenshade, the Dampier who fell asleep in a vampire king's arms, the queen who stood in sunlight, the broken one who proved that different doesn't mean lesser." She turned back to Caspian, smiled through happy tears, "And I'm exactly who I was always meant to be." He pulled her into his arms, held her as night deepened. Tomorrow Isolde would stand in sunlight again, would push her limits, would teach Astrid and others like her. But tonight she simply rested in her mate's embrace. Safe, valued, home. The broken Dampier had become a queen. The tainted blood had become their salvation. And the eternal night was finally beginning to end.